Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts. And every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black everything, everything black. Culture over everything, y'all, we taking it back.
Welcome to Left of Black. I'm your host, Anthony Neal, and we are honored today to welcome Haki Madhubuti. The official biography says a leading poet and one of the architects of the Black arts movement, publisher, editor, and educator. He has been a pivotal figure in the development of a strong Black literary tradition. He's published more than 31 books, some under his former name, Donnell Lee, and is one of the world's best-selling authors of poetry and nonfiction. It is a little bit more personal for me as I trace ground zero in my intellectual development to a young Nation of Islam minister, Donald Smith, who gifted me a copy of Enemy, the Class of Races.
Oh, wow.
When I was a freshman in college in 1983, and a few months later had the privilege of meeting you, Haki. And I still have my signed copy. I beat up enemies, no question about that, but I still have my signed copy of Earthquakes and Sunrise Missions that you signed. So it is such a pleasure for you to join us on Left of Black. And in this, the occasion of a new book, Taught by Women, Poems as Resistance Language, New and Selected Poems. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. And this is really very important to me to be talking to a young, really fine writer like yourself, Professor Neal. And for me to be with you at this time, especially in your own development as a leading voice among our people, and most certainly one of the best writers that we've created to come out of our tradition. And I'm just tired of reading these young writers who are making excuses for being Black. Okay? And so I have not seen that in your work at all. In fact, you praise and basically do not apologize for being who you are. And that's very important to me, as you know.
Thank you very much for that.
So I bring greetings from Chicago.
Thank you.
From our schools, we have the Betty Shabazz Academy, the Barbara Ann Sizemore Academy, New Concept School, and of course from Third World Press and Third World Press Foundation, the oldest independent Black book publishing company in the country, if not the world. So we're happy to be here with you.
Thank you. Let me ask this question. It's 2020 and young folks got Twitter and they got Facebook and they got IG and all of this stuff, TikTok. Why does poetry still matter? Why does it matter for you, obviously, but why does it matter for who we are in this moment?
Well, the two oldest art forms among our people and probably most people in the world is basically music and poetry. And poetry as the supporter and maintainer of language allows us to go deeply inside of ourselves, our people. And it is an art form that continues to humanize us, you see, and bring a certain amount of literacy to any people, and most certainly our people. And that you cannot go through Gwendolyn Brooks, Robert Hayden, Langston Hughes, Claude McKay, Margaret Walker Alexander. I mean, you cannot read these poets and not stop and think about the world differently. And that's what happened to me. I mean, I first came upon Black writers when I was 14 years old, reading Black Boy by Richard Wright. And it slapped me in the face, literally, because I hated myself. I hated my circumstances. I hated my impoverishment. I hated everything. I hated, my mother was in the sex trade. I hated all of that. And she asked me to go to the local library and check out Richard Wright's Black Boy. I refused at first because I did not want to go to a white library and check out a book by a Black writer who was critical of white America and from a white librarian, all right? But I found the book, I went and found the book on the shelf, put it to my chest and walked to an unpeopled section of the library and did not leave until the library closed. Because I was reading Black Boy, and for the first time in my life, Professor Neal, I was being slapped in the face with words and paragraphs and ideas that had never crossed my mind or any of the people that I had discussions with most certainly in high school or in church, any place. And so I read Black Boy in less than 24 hours and then gave it to my mother, went back to the library the next day and checked out everything Richard Wright had published. And the book that helped me move toward becoming a writer was, I don't know, you may be familiar with this book, White Man Listen, okay, by Richard Wright. It's one of his early book of essays. And in that book was an essay on Black writing, Negro writing at that time, Negro literature. And that's what essentially pulled me into this world of Black writing, of quote unquote Negro writing. And so for me, that's what woke me up. And then, so art saved my life, okay? The written word saved my life, because what happened by reading Richard Wright, he brought me into other poets, but the other poets brought me into music, okay? Even though I was already into doo-wop, we're getting into jazz, okay? Getting into the classical Black music of our people. And then I eventually found visual art, okay? The Black artists, the visual artists. And so my life revolves around those three art forms. Art has essentially given me a life. And when I've taught for 42 years. And I started all my classes with a poem, okay? And so when you look at taught by women, most of the classes, I'm reading poems by women, all right? And when you look at the above the title itself and the book itself basically has women all on the cover.
Yeah.
Women, see, I did all on the back, women all on the inside. and so I cannot get past Gwendolyn Brooks and Margaret Burroughs and Barbara Ann Sizemore and my wife, Dr. Carol D. Lee, and Shirley Graham Du Bois and Ida Wells and so forth, Angela Davis and Winnie Mandela and Zora Neale Hurston. I can go on down, because so art humanizes us. It gives us something else to talk about other than brothers, playing basketball, football, or talking about booty calls. All right? It gives another level of conversation, and essentially allows us to express ourselves in ways which, in many ways, are unavailable to us on the streets. And I grew up on the streets.
Yeah. You mentioned the women that inspired you in this book, and all the names are incredible, but I want to talk about three specifically, starting with Gwendolyn Brooks.
Gwendolyn Brooks, I met her in 1967, all right? She was in a church on the south side of Chicago working with the great poet, writer, entertainer, Oscar Brown Jr., first rapper, okay? And
Signifying monkey. Yep.
That's right. So she was teaching in a program where he was training young Blackstone Rangers, men and women, for a Chicago show, Opportunity Knocks. So she was teaching poetry writing. So I and other poets from OBASI, Writers Workshop, which is an organization of Black American culture, Writers Workshop, we came in that Saturday morning, about three or four of us, and sit back in the back of the church as she was teaching. And when she finished, we walked up to her and introduced ourselves. And I was the only one that had published a book at that time. It was 1967. And I gave her a copy of my book, which was Think Black. That's the title of the book, Think Black. And at the cover of Think Black, it was a white cover with the continent of Africa. She looked at it for about 10 seconds and took the book and put it to her heart and said, "Thank you, young man." All right. That workshop there with Oscar Brown Jr. ended 2 weeks later. She started the workshop in her home. And so we would come to her small wood frame home on the south side of Chicago every week. And for the first year, we argued, okay, about everything. I argued. She didn't, okay? And so we ended up, and there's a lot more to that, but we ended up becoming family, okay? After that first year, we were family. I was her cultural son. And I had introduced her to Black literature as I saw it, and to progressive literature. Frantz Fanon, I mean, you can go on and on. So what happened, she was 49 when we met. I was 24, okay, going on 25, she was going on 50. And Before she got out of that first year at 50, she had become she had changed her hair to natural. She published her last book in the Mecca with Harper and Row.
Mm-hmm.
She left Harper and Row. I was at Broadside Press now, okay? She went to Broadside Press. That's what the great poet, publisher, Dudley Randall, all right?
Dudley Randall, yeah.
That's right. And so that's how she left, because we influenced her and she influenced us. And she influenced me at a very great level, because when my third book was published, Don't Cry, Scream, she wrote the introduction to the book. David Lorenz, who worked at Ebony, Johnson Publishing Company, did this profile of me in Ebony in 1969. And so Don't Cry, Scream sold over 75,000 copies in the first year. That's when I started teaching. I was teaching at Columbia College, which Gwendolyn Brooks got the job for me. I left Columbia College and went to Cornell. So I became the first Black writer at Ivy League University. So our relationship continued to develop, and we became family, all right? And if I fast forward to where I did my MFA at the Iowa Workshop, all right? Working with Darwin Turner. He was head of the Africana Studies Department at Iowa, and he gave me a job to teach. Now I'm missing a whole lot. But what happened, I got a call from Chicago State. Would you please come and teach here at Chicago State? Dr. Dolores Lipscomb and Dr. Donda West, the mother of
Kanye.
But I went to Chicago State primarily to do several things. One, start the Gwendolyn Brooks Center for Creative Writing and Black Literature, which we did. To start the annual Gwendolyn Brooks Writers Conferences, which we did. To start the Hall of Fame for Writers of African Descent, we did. And to bring Gwendolyn Brooks to the campus. Now, she had retired, but I talked her into coming back to teach by telling her the truth about Chicago State. Over 2/3 of our students were Black women with children, most of them, okay? So she said, I'd come back. And for the last 10 years of life, she taught at Chicago State. And finally, we started the first MFA program in creative writing at Black literature. And well, it was mainly for Black literature at Chicago State. So it was a long 33-year relationship. And of course, we ended up becoming her publisher after Broadside Press kind of receded back from after Dudley Randall passed. And so Third World Press became her dominant publisher, which we are now. And we have 14 of our books in print at Third World Press, foundation.org. Okay.
I mean, you just told a wonderful story about the importance of mentoring and mentorship. I want to go back to Dudley Randall for a second. One of the things that's always so striking about poetry, it's a working class art form, right? It's the cat sitting on buses and trains who could pull out a notepad and write something. Sometimes seeing, videos of these rappers in the studio, essentially doing the same thing, except they're reading it from their cell phone now, but it's like the same kind of tradition. But Dudley Randall's thing in the beginning was to publish these broadsides, right? These one-page poems.
That's right.
Yeah, talk a little bit about what it was like, trying to connect people. Because when I think about you and the late Amiri Baraka, obviously someone like Sonia Sanchez, Nikki Giovanni, it was like, you had the ear of young Black folks, right? But you also had their feet. Right. It was like you had taken these words and connected it to the kind of rhythms they were listening to in ways that there was just a different cadence than what they might have been hearing even from a Langston Hughes in that period of time.
Most certainly. And we were part of this struggle, that we were not writing in isolation or as individuals locked down into our spaces to write. We were part of this struggle, part of the ongoing struggle. And so the Black Arts movement actually started with the assassination of Malcolm X. Malcolm was our literary father in many ways, okay? And for me, most certainly, El-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz Malcolm X meant a great deal, because I'm from that Detroit area, Chicago area, where he was currently a part of at that time while he was alive in terms of the Nation of Islam. And so, yes, Dudley Randall, Detroit, all right? I met Dudley Randall after Malcolm had been shot and been murdered. All right. Dudley came to Chicago. I was volunteering at the museum, the DuSable Museum of African American History, which Margaret Burroughs and Charlie Burroughs and others founded. And he came to Chicago to elicit the support of Margaret Burroughs in editing a book on Malcolm. It's titled For Malcolm. that's when I met Dudley Randall. And I gave him my poem on Malcolm, and it was included in the book. But less than a week after, because I already published, Think Black. And about a week or 2 weeks after that, I sent him my second book, which was Black Pride. All right. And Dudley Randall got back to me in less than a week, which is highly unusual for a publisher. He got back to me in about a week and said, "We want to publish your book. Can I write the introduction?" Well, I mean, you cannot ask for better, praise than that. Right. And of course, I said, absolutely yes. He said, "Well, come to Detroit, and so we can, talk about it and sign a contract." So at that time, I'm taking buses. Everything. I jumped on the Greyhound bus and went up to Detroit. This is important. Margaret Burroughs, Charlie Burroughs, and others founded a museum in her home. Okay. I go to Detroit. Broadside Press is in Dudley Randall's and his wife's home. All right. So I get there and I said, "Okay, look," he said, I said, "Well, I'll sign these papers, but let's just shake hands." Okay. That's my tradition. And that's it. That's what happened. And so I got back to Chicago. Gwendolyn Brooks, we sit down talking. She's got her natural. She's black. Well, she's always been black to the bone, so I'm not going to even question that. But the point is that she had decided to leave Harper and Row to go to Broadside Press. All right. Now, check this out. When Don't Cry Scream was published and it was doing so well, Paula Gettings, who was on the working at Random House with Toni Morrison, she comes to Chicago to try to get me to leave Broadside Press and bring Don't Cry Scream to Random House. I told Paul, "There's no way in the world I'm gonna leave Broadside Press," but I've never been to New York. Okay. And so I get a free trip to New York. That's when I meet Toni Morrison. Paula takes me to Toni Morrison at Random House, Toni Morrison's office, and Toni said, "Don," I'm still Don Lee at that time, "Don, we're ready for you. We're gonna take Don't Cry Scream or whatever else you got." And I said, "Toni, who wouldn't want to be published by Random House?" But I made my commitment to Black publishing. I'm staying at Broadside Press. Okay, that's what happened. So Dudley Randall was kind of a big brother, but almost like a father figure to me. And he was like you say, the Broadsides came out, and the first book that they published was the book between himself and Margaret Danner called Poem Counterpoem. All right. And in that book, you get the great poem he did on W.B. Du Bois, right? And Booker T. All right. So no, that's I'm a trick. So you look at my mentors. I'm talking about El Hajj Malik Al-Shabazz, Margaret Burroughs, Charlie Burroughs, Dudley Randall, and after Dudley Randall, the man by the name of Hort W. Fuller. Hort W. Fuller was a managing editor of Negro Digest Black World magazine, which was the key magazine coming out of the Black Arts movement. All right. And Hort Fuller was really one of the first real serious world Black intellectuals that I ever met. All right. Because he had traveled around much of the world, knew most of the African-centered writers and so forth. And Hort kind of adopted me also. At that time, Professor, I was 6'1", about 145, 50 pounds. Okay, maybe about 50 pounds. I had done 3 years in the military. I had done 3 years in the Army. Okay, because that's another whole story. If you read Yellow Black, which was my memoir, you'll see that. But Hort Fuller, I had never met a man as pro-race as Hort Fuller. He would be our equivalent of W.B. Du Bois and the Crisis magazine. So Hort Fuller and Negro Digest, and we're the ones who pushed to have Negro Digest name changed to Black World. We set up picket lines outside Johnson Publishing Company to get it changed from Negro to Black World. So Hort Fuller was the next person who had a profound effect. In fact, Hort Fuller, the guy would take me to dinner at least once a week. So he said, at least you get one good meal a week. Okay. Oh man. So got Hort. Then there's Barbara Ann Sizemore. Dr. Barbara Ann Sizemore was one of the major educators in the world. I was teaching at Howard University. She became the first Black superintendent of DC school system. All right. And so we at that time we had a magazine, Black Books Bulletin, and we interviewed her for the magazine. She didn't last that long because she was Black. She wasn't gonna do no Negro stuff, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, also with Gwendolyn Brooks, okay? So these are the people that formed me. And you notice how those persons that formed me, they're all writers, number one, and all educators.
Right.
And so I've been on I've never published a book with white publishers. Now I published essays and anthologies and magazines and stuff with white people, but I decided that once we started Third World Press, and once I was with Broadside Press, I would never, give a book to a white publisher.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like, in retrospect, an amazing and prescient decision to make. Particularly at a time where I imagine that white publishers were throwing money, at Black arts writers or anybody Black in this period of time. I mean, we see the same thing playing out in the academy in that period of time. Mm-hmm. And we've come, it's circular, right? So we're back to it now 2 or 3 times after that. What would you say to young folks now who really, I don't think, fully appreciate what it means to publish and do work with the independent press, both in terms of publishing houses, but also Black magazines? And, one of the things I always appreciated about Manning Marable, he had a column that he did, Beyond the Color Line, and he would offer it up to the Black press for free. Right. And we don't have a lot of models like that because everybody's trying to get into the New York Times and the Washington Post, and those are important things. But what do you say to young writers now about being able to stake your claim with something that is Black and independent?
We're talking about the columns. Dr. Maulana Karenga publishes almost a weekly column with I think it's the Los Angeles Sentinel, which is the Black newspaper.
Newspaper, yep.
Dr. Ron Daniels does the same thing in terms of Institute of the Black World, 21st Century. But what I would see, the problem today, as I see it, is the getting caught up in this, with this technology. And that you see kids walking down, just with their heads on the phone.
Yeah.
We were in the Black Arts Movement. You have Black Lives Matter now.
Mm-hmm.
But the movement with Black Lives Matter, which I think is very effective, most certainly after the murder of George Floyd, and it became an international phenomenon, all right? But you find that too many of the young people who are even involved in that movement they don't read. See, what happened with us, we were forced to read. In fact, in the Institute of Positive Education, which was one of our institutions, we would study a book a week, all right? And it was not just poetry, but fiction, literary nonfiction. It was psychology. It was history, politics. We would study together, all right? And we would struggle. When King came to Chicago, I was on all of his marches, all of them, as a foot soldier. Okay, it's about 1966, 67, 68, before he was murdered, obviously. And so that's the difference, I think, that the technology has taken these young people's minds away from the literary, all right? And so, not 100%, obviously, but what we've tried to do with Third World Press, and that's one of the reasons we have these schools. Yeah. Our schools are book schools, okay? Yeah. Now, the problem during COVID-19, we got to use the same technology because we are hybrid teaching our children, K through 8. And so they have to deal with these iPads or computers. Mm-hmm. So we're caught between a hurricane and a volcano. All right. But these 600 students that we're dealing with each and every day, it continues to be a challenge for our faculty and so forth. But it can be done. And so this is why Third World Press Foundation, we continue to publish and continue to essentially push literature and literacy at a very high level. We got a very, very active literature program in the prisons across the country. Any prisoner, and it doesn't matter what his or her culture is, can write us and we will send them 3 free books. And all we're asking them to do is to read the books, pass them on to other brothers and sisters in the prisons. And if they want more books, send us a paragraph on the books that you've read. And you send us a paragraph, we'll send you another book. Okay. So the struggle continues, Professor Neal, as you know. And it's important that young people understand that this world is ours also. We were the first to give the warning about Donald Trump. We published in 16 or 17 the book, Not Our President. If you don't have it, we'll send you a copy of it. But we have about 35 or 40 writers from across the country, including Elizabeth Alexander, not Elizabeth Alexander, but Elizabeth Warren, in the book about this dysfunctional man that has been the president over the last 4 years.
It's so funny you mentioned the reading thing. One of the people that you've mentored throughout your career is Bakari Kitwana. And Bakari and I talk once or twice a week, and inevitably we're having a conversation. Now that we're old heads, right? we're having a conversation about young folks who just don't read or don't know. And we came out of a generation because of folks like yourself and so many others where we couldn't imagine having a public voice without reading, informing that, right? And reading those folks who came before us. Another name I want to mention to you is Queen Mother Moore. They just released a 90-minute version of the film Nation Time, which is about, the Gary, Indiana gathering in 1972. And in the trailer, they spent a little bit of time on Queen Mother Moore. And, a lot of folks are talking about reparations now. One of my colleagues here at Duke, Sandy Darity, right, is talking a great deal about it. But it's amazing how many folks can talk about, reparations and not know the kind of labor and work that Queen Mother Moore had been putting in for such a long time. So talk a little bit about her inspiration for you.
And she's on the book, as you notice. And Queen Mother Moore preceded in Cobra, whose their major project is reparations. And Queen Mother Moore, of course, was from the East Coast, and I'm in the Midwest. But every time we would get out there in terms of struggle, we would sit down and just listen to her. Right? She was a major, major force. Right? And so this is why I put her on the book. She was dead on in terms of reparation. But other than that, she was African-centered. Queen Mother Moore, that's why she got the name, Queen Mother Moore, which is African-centered. She had basically helped introduce us young heads to the importance of the continent, the importance of the literature from the continent, the importance of the art from the continent. And she was never judgmental. And this is why she's a queen mother, is that she looked at me and others, and probably Amelia also, and Sonia, as just, they're young kids, they're going to find out. But I'm glad to hear that. I haven't seen the film that you're talking about. I'm glad to hear that because I was there in '72. I was at the conference in Gary, Indiana, where Mayor Hatcher basically had just built a new convention center, and we came in there. We were one of the first conventions to come in there. I was with the Congress of African People at that time. Amiri Baraka was the head, and so it was a very important gathering. And as you know, they are doing another political convention next year in Newark. Okay, They're planning that now. But you mentioned Bakari Kitwana. Let me just say a couple of words about him. Because I met Bakari, he brought me to his university.
Rochester, yeah.
Rochester, right. He was working on 2 master's degrees, okay? And he wanted to come and work with us in Chicago. I had said, I'm not bringing nobody else outside the city into Chicago because I had so many not many, but enough negative experiences. But he talked his way into coming to Chicago. And he was one of the best young men, literary young men, serious young men that I ever come across. All right. And he has remained a part of my family for all these 30 some odd years that we've known each other. We published his first book, Rap Against Gangster Rap.
Yep.
And set him on that path. But he's first class all the way.
Yeah. Margaret Walker Alexander. Talk a little bit about,
Other than her hats, huh? Now, interesting enough, Margaret Walker, I went to Iowa. She went to Iowa too. Okay. Now, she ended up getting not only an MFA, but she got a PhD. I think she got a PhD she may have gotten it from Northwestern, but it was either Northwestern or Iowa. But when Margaret would have come to the city, she knew everybody. I mean, most certainly Gwendolyn Brooks and Margaret Burroughs. But the key thing, she got down to Jackson State University in Jackson, and she would basically have these conferences. And she would invite all of us down to the conferences in Jackson, Mississippi. And then after the conference or the day in, she would cook. She was a master cook. I mean, here she was the woman who was one of the Yale poets, younger poets, worked the master poet for our people and so forth. And she would just take us into her home. And most certainly, I remember Nikki and Sonia and myself and Mitty. We all loved her just like we loved Queen Mother Moore. These women would not betray you.
Mm-hmm.
And you must understand, and I'm sure you do, that the most despised women in the world are Black women. And so for me and for my generation and those who preceded me to be around these great women, it allowed us to understand our own humanity and why it's absolutely necessary that we not be afraid of strong, intelligent, talented, on the point, serious Black women. Okay. And that's why I married my wife, Dr. Carol D. Lee. My wife, Dr. Carol D. Lee, Mama Sufficient, is brilliant. And you may know her work, Mark, but she's brilliant. She's not only been inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the Academy of Education, all this stuff. And she's now going to be the incoming president of the National Academy of Education. And she's brilliant. That's one of the reasons she married me. I understand that. But I can't, how can you be around these women and say, okay, you just stay in the kitchen? That doesn't make any damn sense at all.
Right. I got one more name for you. Over the summer, Nick Cannon got into a little trouble with an interview that he did with Professor Griff, talking about white folks and folks who read, knew that part of what they were talking about was drawn directly from the Crest color theory. Talk a little bit about Frances Cress Welsing.
I used to teach at Howard University. In fact, after I left Cornell, I went to UIC. I got a call from Dr. Andrew Billingsley, the sociologist. Climate Jacob Ladder is one of his major books. He was the provost at Howard University. He said, Don, you want to come teach at Howard? Now, of course, I'm saying that.
Right.
What if you read Yellow Black? I write in Yellow Black. I used to sell these magazine subscriptions, and I would knock on the door and I get into my spiel about buying these. I'm working my way through Howard University. And I've never been to Howard, never been to DC. That was my lie. Okay. So when Andrew Billingsley called me and said, you want to come teach here at Howard? I said, yes. So they brought me out there and really didn't even have to do an interview or nothing. But I had to talk to Dr. Billingsley. And he said, well, young man, we gonna set you up. We're gonna set you up. And we're gonna give you a full professor salary, and you only have to teach 1 or 2 courses, but you'll be working with the great Stephen Henderson. Stephen Henderson came out of Morehouse. He and Mercer Cook had done the book Militant Black Writing, and they even mentioned me in the book. Okay, so I said, "Are you serious?" Stephen Henderson asked for me. Okay, so I said, "Yes, absolutely yes." But I said, "I got one condition." And he said, "Well, what's that condition?" "I want to commute." He said, "What?" I said, "I want to commute between Chicago and DC every week." "Well, sir, are you serious, young man?" I said, "Well, yes, sir. We're trying to build these institutions, these schools and public schools."
Right.
And I had read Alvin Toffler's Future Shop, where professors were commuting. Okay, so he said, "That's not going to happen. We got Sterling Brown here. He's not commuting. We got Chancellor Williams here. He's not commuting.
He's not commuting.
And here, you talking about commuting to Chicago. Are you serious?" I said, "Yes, sir, I am." So I got up and walked out. Before I got out the building, his secretary come and said, "Okay, Dr. Billingsley, we want to talk to you." He said, I don't know where you got this idea from, but we bought it. And for 8 years, I commuted between Chicago and DC. They paid for it. Now, while I'm there, I meet Frances Cress Welsing. Frances Cress Welsing is on the faculty at Chicago State. At Howard University. But she had been influenced by a man by the name of Neely Fuller.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Neely Fuller had written these 2 volumes on race, which he published himself. And So if you look at the crest theory, you look at the book that we published, the ISIS papers, she gives due credit to Neely Fuller. Okay, and she continued to develop the crest theory and using essentially the world as her research place. It was so powerful, Professor, that Howard University let it go, and we protested, and most certainly we gave her essays, not only the crest theory but other essays. We published them first in Black Books Bulletin, which was our magazine coming out of the Institute of Higher Education. Okay, and when we had enough of the essays, now Bakari was working with us at that time, so I told Bakari, you would be the editor with Frances Cress Wilson. We're gonna do her book, the ISIS Papers, and that's how that came out. She was a wonderful woman.
Because before the ISIS papers, I mean, basically people were passing on photocopies,
right,
of the essay.
Right.
Every December 4th, if I'm in the classroom, I will start the class by reading One-Sided Shootout. The piece that you wrote, for Fred Hampton. Talk a little bit about that particular moment and Fred Hampton, and what he inspired amongst folks at that time in Chicago.
Well, last year was the 50th anniversary of his assassination. And I did a piece in Chicago Magazine. So if you go back to Chicago Magazine in December of 2019, you'll see that. And so I pulled portions from that piece for that issue. And in fact, it's in Talk About Women. That piece is in, the whole piece is in Talk About Women. And Fred and I met several times and struggled. But the last time we met, we were both speaking at Roosevelt University. I'm not sure what was the occasion, but we were both speaking. And he spoke first and I spoke after him. And he stayed around. He said, I just wanted to meet you, Brother Don. And I said, you're doing great work, young man. I mean, we're about almost close to the same age, okay? But I'm saying you're doing great work. But I got one piece of advice. Because I think he was from Maywood. Okay, I'm in Chicago. And I said, and he had become the Illinois chapter head of the Panther Party.
Yeah.
Right. And of course Bobby Rush and others too. But what I said to him was, you got to be careful about calling the Chicago Police Department pigs. They are pigs. They don't care nothing about you or me. And they will kill you. Okay. And then of course, very shortly after that, because it was the same year, they came into his the headquarters and murdered him. Okay. So, and I write about it. It's in the book. I write about it. So Fred was a natural leader. I mean, he could speak, pretty much off the top of his head. He was a reader, and just like all of us at that time, we were looking for our niche. Where can we work? Where can we struggle, and so forth? And we were doing multiple things all the time. And so while Fred and the Black Panther Party were basically building the breakfast programs and other things, we were building our schools. They were basically on the west side of Chicago. We were on the south side of Chicago. Okay. But he was a fine young man and did great work for our people while he was alive.
Yeah. This has been a marvelous conversation. I thank you for taking the time out.
I got to read a poem, man. What are you talking about, Mark?
Oh, yeah, we could do that. We could do that.
We were trying to sell a book, Talk About Women. And why would a Black man write a book primarily on Black women, man? Come on, no, Mark. I'm just going to read two pieces. And
okay.
And the first piece is actually the first piece in the book, Why Women? Talk About Women is my acknowledgement and thank you to over half the world's population who remain too often property, raped, honor killed, diminished, enslaved, lynched, dismissed, excluded, lied to, abused, sexualized, sex trafficked, devalued, demeaned, executed, imprisoned, forgotten, forced into unwanted marriages, miseducated, undereducated, beheaded, and bodily disfigured, all motivating me to be pro-girl and woman, which required serious listening and specialized learning, advanced thought, care, action, and language that highlighted Black music, poetry, and visual arts, which I received from my mother, a woman who worked and died in the sex trade of the 1950s. Just as capitalism, white supremacy, Black ignorance, enslavement, and anti-religious thought killed her, I, her only son, am able today and tomorrow to act and state with finality, stop. And again, thank you to Black women and the world of women for saving my life. And I write also for the consideration of poets. This is like the second piece in the book. Where is the poetry of resistance? The poetry of honorable defiance, unafraid of the lies from career politicians and businessmen, not respectful of journalists who write official speak void of educated thought, without double search or subsurface questions that war talk demands. Where is the poetry of doubt and suspicion? Not in the service of the state, bishops, and priests, not in the service of beautiful people and late night promises, not in the service of influence, incompetence, and academic clown talk. So I just want to finish this beautiful interview with one poem. It's called Liberation Narratives. It's the third poem in the book. After which I would strongly suggest people read Art 2, Reviewing a Life, a Calling. That's about me and how I got to this point. But I'm going to read the poem after that. It's called Liberation Narratives. And I put it up front for a specific reason, and you'll see as you listen to the poem. One, it may be a man's world, yet it's women who write music, that navigate the harmony that grows children, drives learning, prepare knives for the cutting of green beans and lies, while dodging genocide and rape, as men who run the world, bathed in the power of extreme illusion, overuse collateral damage, and deficit language to justify it's a man's world. Two, best advice to men, marry women smarter than you. Occasionally let them know it. Number three, my mother was prettier than imagination, soaked in honey, flavored with hot water and lemon. Her heart was there too. She was a short poem. Dead at 34, buried without flowers, notation, or truthful stories. She challenged men walking on her life like she was a used thread mill years before they were invented. I have her eyes. I see damage everywhere. I become a stop sign. 4, Janet liked girls and told them so. Robert liked boys and kept it a secret. Both grew into teenagers still liking girls and still liking boys. Each kept their desires to themselves. In the 21st century, parts of the world began to mature and finally understood why Janet loved women and Robert loved men. They were born that way, enough said. 5, if poetry is to have meaning, it must mean something. More than metaphor and simile, more than tree talk and looking for gigs, more than competition and unrhymed free verse serious to the bone of incomprehension, surely to land the poet a Guggenheim or MacArthur Genius Grant. Artists should not expect from readers and listeners and observers fairness, objectivity, or deep knowledge of wordplay or interpretive ideas of paint or jumping notes. Often a smile will do. And yes, to buy and share books, visuals, and music will help. Saying yes to children may get you into heaven. Saying no to war builds character and conscience. Giving 10% of what you earn to the homeless will aid in your sleeping a full night, hopefully to awaken creating healthier poems, prose, pictures, and critical perspectives of the letter P, beyond politics, potholes, profiteers, poverty, pimp juice, patriots, Protestants, and playboys of the Western world. 6, if you don't know who you are, anybody can name you. And number 7, if the world loses elephants, dolphins, polar bears, frogs, trees, the ability of the majority to do good, clean water, prayer, and meditation in all languages. If the world loses love across borders, honest vegans and vegetarians, a mother's love, a father's caring, children dancing to knowledge and colors, artists not lying for money, privilege, or fame. If the world loses books, newspapers, clear thinkers, practical doers, poets, promising futures for the great majority rainforest, a world vocabulary that accents yes and possibilities rather than no, and you can't do that. If the world loses the great apes, schools, giraffes, salmon, the coral reefs, insects, worms, organic farmers, compost, green tea, workers who use their hands to build and repair stuff, North and South poles, teachers, people of faith, engineers, wheatgrass, carrot juice, oatmeal, and 7-grain bread. If the world loses you and water, yes, precious you and the daily taste of life, it finally means that we lost butterflies yesterday and failed our children. And this poem was for Tarana Burks and the Me Too movement, #MeToo movement. And so I want to thank you, dear brother, for allowing me to spend this time with you. It was very valuable to me, and I hope valuable to your listening and viewing audience.
Thank you, Haki. It's been such a privilege. Thank you for this interview and all the contributions that you've made to our people and definitely to me over these many, many decades.
Thank you.
Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts, and every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black, everything black, culture over everything, y'all. We taking it back, black.